Hi, I'm Bob Alsop with ShopSabre CNC. Around here they call me Routerbob. Today I'm going to show you the versatility of a ShopSabre CNC router. This machine is a ShopSabre IS 408, and that's our most popular CNC router. And there's a reason. It's used a lot by panel processors, whether it be cabinet shop, exhibit companies, those kinds of places. But you know, there's another part of woodworking that really ties into that, and it has to do with how you can sell products, and that is adding things to them that make them more valuable. And one of the things I've always wanted to do is curve moldings like you might find on something that's a credenza or an entertainment center or a piece of furniture. And I want to show you how to make that. It's much easier than it used to be. But before we do that, let's take a look at this machine and why I selected this specification. The application in our video actually has some real unique requirements that have to do with edge finish and accuracy of surfaces. So it made sense for us to select one of our machine tool grade CNCs. This happens to be an IS 4x8. And when I say machine tool grade, here's what that means. It means it has an all welded structural steel frame. All the machining's done in a single setup. We use precision contour guide rails. We use ball screw drives, all of that stuff, AC digital servos, and of course our Super Z technology. But there's another part of this machine also that I wanted to show, and that's how you fix your parts. We show vacuum tables with flow through a lot, and typically you'll see a spool board on there. That's not always required. In fact, in our case here, in our setup, we're actually going to use a fixture board that's just held by vacuum in one zone. So that's a real important part, once again, of creating this part. Part locator pins make it real easy to do setups, to position spool boards and things like that. And of course, this machine has an automatic tool changer because our applications have multiple tools. This happens to have one of our HSD 10 horsepower spindles and a 10 position tool changer. Like all ShopSabre CNC routers, this machine features our ShopSabre CNC controller. It's really easy to use for your operator. You know, if you'd like more information on the IS series machines, you can go to ShopSabre.com and watch a video just about how these machines are built. Now, let's go in the office and let's take a look at software. I've always wanted to explore things you can do with your CNC router to make the products that you make more valuable. And you know, you can start with a base cabinet. You know, there are things you can do to that that really almost turn it into a piece of furniture, and that's what I really want to look into. What you see on the screen here is basically a model of the top of a cabinet. That could be a base cabinet, it could be a wall cabinet, it could be a tall cabinet, it could be an entertainment center. And you see, so you've got a top and you've got your parts here. But what if you could do this? What if you could add this stuff to it? What if you could add moldings to the side? And what if you could add a piece of curved crown molding? That just made that a very, very valuable cabinet. What I want to do in this video today is show you how easy it is to actually create those. You do not have to be able to solid model the parts. We're going to be using a feature in VCarve Pro. Let's get started on that. Now, what I have open now is VCarve Pro. And VCarve Pro's got a neat toolpath that's called Molding Toolpath, and it actually creates that 3D molding that we looked at. And it does not require a solid model. And so it's a really slick system. And to me, it makes it so much simpler to do this. I got to have two things. I have to have a cross section of the molding, and I have to have the curved line that I want it to follow. So let's see how we create that. We'll create a new file. The blank I'm going to make it out of is actually a hard rock maple. It's 40 inches long, 6.5 inches wide, and 1.75 inches tall. We're going to be touching off to the bottom. So there's our blank. Now, if our molding, if you think about this, what is the bounding box for that molding? Well, the cabinet's going to be about 30 inches wide, so let's do it this way. Let's create a rectangle. We'll kind of center it. We'll come over here, we'll say 30, and then we'll say 6, and we'll hit apply, and we'll center that, okay? So that's basically what you might think of as the bounding box. When you look at the front of that cabinet, that's from the top of the molding to the bottom, that's where that is. But that's not really what we need, because we have to subtract the 2 inches. That's the actual height of the molding. The molding, when you're done, is 2 inches tall and 1.5 inches wide. So we really need to subtract that. So instead of 6, that needs to be 4. So we'll just resize that. And make sure that's not clicked. Make sure you're at the corner, and instead of 6, type in 4. Okay, so that's our bounding box. Now, the next thing I want to do is I actually want to make this work with a method that I can produce the same results over and over. you know, a lot of times with this recurve stuff, it's difficult to reproduce that shape. So there's a pretty easy way to do that with VCarve Pro. First thing I'm going to do is add some points. So I'm going to turn on the node editor, and we'll click the line, and you notice there's your point. I'm going to right click that, say insert a point. I'm going to right click this, whoops, tell it to insert a point. And now we've got these points, okay? And you'll see why I need to do that later. Okay, the first thing I think I'll do then is let's drag this up to that point, right? And then I'm going to right click on it and say smooth point. And here's what it did. It created Beziers. Now, Bezier is a handlebar curve. And by the way, those are splines. They're not arcs at all. And you can do all kinds of things with them. But what my problem with that is, it's really hard to get everything identical. So what I want to do is I want to add a couple points here. So there's actually a midpoint there. So if I drag this down, it should snap to that midpoint right there. Same thing here. Okay, so that makes the top consistent. Now my problem down here is I don't have a midpoint. So let's just draw a line. So we'll just draw a straight line from that corner to down here, right? And then we'll take that line and we'll add a midpoint. Whoops, have to go back to the node editor. And we'll say, whoops, insert midpoint, okay? And we're gonna, now we've got snaps here and here, so we have natural midpoint snaps. So this time let's go back to our curve and let's take this line and snap it to the midpoint and do the same thing here, you see. Now I have a beautiful curve, and I can make that curve tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and it's going to be the same. All right, now, so that looks really, really good. So let's clean it up a little bit. First off, let's go back to this. Okay, we're not going to be able, okay, that we can delete. That's not going to be a problem. In order to just leave the curve, what I need to do is, whoops, let's come back over here. Let's get in close. Let's node editor, click that line, right click, cut vector. Okay. Same thing down here. Node editor, right click, cut vector. And now I should be able to delete that. And there's a curve I need. So there's a curve that I need, and that's half of what I have to have. Now I want to show you a step that you need to always follow in this, and that is, these are actually splines. So if I look at it in the node editor, you know, you actually see the handlebars. But the problem is when it outputs code, that's broken down into tiny, tiny, tiny lines of code. So there might be 300 little lines of code there. So I want to take that basic shape, which is organic, and then convert it to a mechanical shape. It's really easy to do. You take this icon right here, you click that, and preview, and that's what it's going to look like. Now what happens is, that's basically made tangent arcs and lines, and what happens is if I look at that in the node editor, see this is a midpoint, so that's an arc. That's one line of code. So each of those segments represents one line of code in your program. So by doing that step of turning the geometry into tangent arcs and lines, your programs get really, really simple. Okay? So we'll undo that. All right, so that's the first part. Now while we're messing with this, let's think about what needs to happen on the end here. Let's put a straight line segment on here, and let's see how long that is. Let's make that, let's anchor it here, and let's make that about 3 inches. Now what we're doing is we're extending that down for the miter at the end of our molding. That's all that is. And we'll do the same thing down here. So we'll make a straight line, and I usually just draw it and size it. Make sure it's anchored here, 3 inches. Okay. Now we'll go back to these, we'll circle, and we'll connect it. Now that gives me one open piece of geometry. So that's how you create that line in VCarve Pro to start with. I need one more piece of geometry before I'm ready to use the molding toolpath, and that is what is the cross section of the molding itself. I've actually already drawn that, so I'll just turn that on. Save time. Let's take a closer look. To give you an idea of size, this is 1.5 inches thick and 2 inches tall. It's basically a shape I created. This is a 3/8 round over. That's an 1/8 inch drop, and that's actually just a large radius, big cove. And what's going to happen, we're going to cut that out with a ball nose tool, and it's actually going to leave a radius here. And later we're going to come back with a straight tool and square that corner out. So, all right, to use this, I have to modify it a little bit. First, let's select it, right-click it, copy, and we'll just paste and grab that pasted copy over here. You don't have to be on the material, you could be anywhere, but we'll put that here, and it's going to have to be rotated 90 degrees. This part's not intuitive. All right, so rotate that 90. And I don't need all that geometry. I really just need this surface here. If I leave a drop here, it wants the tool path all the way down, and I'm actually going to cut that edge with a straight tool. So let's go back over and let's clean this up. We'll hit the node editor, so I'm going to cut right here, cut vector, and I'm going to cut this vector right here. Okay, we'll go back to this, and I should be able to just delete that. So we'll right click delete, and there's our geometry. All right, so that's what we needed. Okay, we'll just leave this up here on the screen, it doesn't really matter. All right, now let's go to the molding toolpath, that's right here. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select the actual drive rail and then the cross section that we're going to use. Now let's take a look at it. It shows which side of the line the geometry is going to be on. If that happened to be wrong, which it can, if it were this way, all you do is right click on that line and reverse the direction. You do the same thing here. If it's oriented incorrectly, you just reverse the direction. That looks pretty good, okay? Now you notice it's figured out that the cut depth's 1.5 inches, but it knows our material's thicker. Well, I actually want the molding to be flat against the bottom of the material, so I set it like that. And then we get down here into the tool area, okay? So the first thing I'm going to use is a 1/4 inch ball nose tool, and I'm going to use a special one, and that's because these are really deep cuts. You know, we're getting down there to 1.5 inches deep, and the tool I'm going to be using is a tapered ball tool from our friends over at Vortex, and it's a neat tool. It's a 1/4 inch ball nose on the end, and then it tapers out to a 1/2 inch. So I've got plenty of cutting length, and it's unbelievably rigid, and it's a beautiful tool for this application. Okay, to do our straight stuff, we're actually going to be using a flat bit, and that happens to be a 1/2 inch end mill. And you know what? I went ahead and got a 3-flute finisher because they cut so smooth, because I'm actually going to machine the back side of that molding, and I'm also going to use that tool to actually do the roughing cut. So those are the two tools that we're using in this molding tool path. And let's hit calculate and see what happens. And we'll reset that, we'll get rid of that. So you notice it's generated 2 tool paths. There's the first one, and that's a rough pass. So that's what it's just going to step down, and guess what? Our tool path's wrong. You see how the curved part's going the other way? That's an easy fix. We'll open it back up, we'll go back to our drawing, and I'm going to take this, reverse direction, and let's try that again. We'll unclick that, zoom it back in, we'll reset. Let's try that one again. There we go, now that's correct. So this is the flat on top, or where it's going to be, and that's a curve. Then it created this other tool path that's the smoothing tool path. So basically that's how you create the geometry and actually create that molded shape. Now let's take a look at what's involved in the other tool paths before we're ready to actually machine that part. All right, now let's think a little bit more about how we're actually going to machine this, the order things have to happen. So, okay, so I've added some extra tool paths here. First off, here's the rough pass. Okay, while I've got that tool in the machine, I'm going to go ahead and create a profile cut on the front, and here's what it's going to do. And that's going to cut that free, right? That gets that out of the way. Now, you really wouldn't have to, but you got to remember, we have to hold these parts, and these are sometimes hard to hold. So even though my fixture board is held by vacuum, the blank is taped on, and I've got some screws on it also, because by the time you're done, you're going to need all that. So what I wanted to do was to get that roughed out. Then the next tool path is our finish pass that we just looked at earlier that we created. Okay, so that gives us our nice molded edge there. And then I've added another tool path here that I'm actually doing with a straight bit. And what that's, remember in reality, what looks like a square corner here is really going to be the tool radius. So what I want to do is take a straight bit and go through there and clean that out, and that's what that does. And I'm using pretty much any straight bit works. You got to make sure it's long enough to reach down there. I happen to use one of the 3/8 deep bits from Vortex Tool for that. And then the final thing we want to do is we want to do that back cut. And so I call that profile 2, and we'll slow that down so you can kind of see it. Did it multiple passes, and we'll hit that. And so what it's going to do is it's just going to go multiple passes. And I always start real conservative on this stuff because I want a good part. Once you do this, then you can start watching it be machined, and you can speed up. You can take heavier cuts, but I'm always conservative to start with. And if we look at this, you can see I left tabs in there. So now all the machining is completed on that, and all I have to do is trim these ends and get rid of those tabs. Once again, I wanted to make sure that the part didn't move. All right, so that's what's required in making this curve molding. Now, I also decided to make the 2 side pieces, and let's take a look at that. Now, the drawing that you see on the screen is I created just to make the 2 side pieces, so it should be very familiar here. Now, what you're seeing here, these are actually holes. These are counter bores, and I'm putting those in there to help hold the material down. And I actually did some on the curve piece too, because I was worried about once I start cutting parts out, things moving. So what do I have here? I have my drive rail right here. Okay, that's what those 2 are. And this is the geometry for the back side, and these lines right here are where I'm actually going to cut that corner out. Okay, here is the original profile I started with. Here's what we actually configured. So let's go to 3D, and let's look at. So the first operation is going to be that rough cut. So there's one side, and then we're going to do the same over there. So that rough side are 2 side pieces. Then we come back in with a profile cut. And once again, that trims that front. Okay, then we do those are finish passes. We do both of those. And then here's our corner cleanup bit. That's that little mark there and there. And finally, there's our final profile on the back side. And as before, we left tabs to make sure everything holds together. So those are the tool paths that are required to make those 2 straight moldings. Now let's talk about how we actually are going to set this up on the machine. Okay, let's change our focus to the machine and how we're going to actually do all this on the machine. We've looked at the tool paths. Now, how do I set this up on the machine? Well, first off, the machine has a vacuum table, but I typically wouldn't use vacuum like that to hold these parts. But I am going to use vacuum to hold a fixture board. But the fixture board doesn't have to be that big. It really just needs to be big enough for that front vacuum zone to cover that, so I can just use that. So I'm using vacuum to hold that in place. Now, if I wanted to make this repeatable, in my case, I'm just using a part locator pins to locate that fixture board. What if this were a setup that I were going to use over and over? In that case, I would actually machine holes in this fixture board that lined up with the part locator pins, so then I could raise the pins, drop those down, and that would always keep that in correct alignment, and then I could use it over and over. That's not a concern for me here. Okay, as you can see on the screen here, this is a fixture board, and then this is a blank, and this is a curve molding, and this is a blank for the side moldings. So pretty much that's how it's going to be configured on the machine. And then what I did was I basically took all the tool paths and combined them so it amortizes tool changes. So when an operation's done, it's done on both of those pieces. So that's basically my idea for setting this up. Now let's go out and look at this on the machine. Let's run the tool paths and let's take a look at our molding. curved molding project came out unbelievably good. I just wish you could feel how smooth that is. You know, I could have made that any shape or any profile. And the beauty of it is I did not have to use solid modeling. I was able to do that with VCarve Pro, and you can too. If you have any questions, you can contact us at ShopSabre.com. Thank you for watching.